Hi, and thanks for watching this message video, and don't forget to go through the life lesson that goes with it. And for those who can't make a Sunday, don't forget that there is a podcast of that sermon that goes along with this message video and life lesson. Today we're starting a new series called What the What, and here's why. There are times where God takes people through certain things that are so confusing or so hard to understand that the only thing we can say is, what the what? Or something along those lines. But when God takes us through those things, what we can learn is that we can trust Him even though things are confusing or things don't make sense. So we're going to go through a variety of different stories throughout the Bible where God took people through what the what moments just so they could learn that. And the first story that we're going to go through is the story of Joseph, the son of Jacob, the guy who had his name changed to Israel. Here's how his story begins. Genesis 37, 2 through 11. This is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph was 17 years old, he often tended his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day, Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. One night, Joseph had a dream, and when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. "Listen to this dream," he said. "We were out in a field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly, my bundle stood up, and your bundles all gathered around and bowed low before mine." His brothers responded, "So you think you will be our king, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us?" And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. Soon Joseph had another dream, and again he told his brothers about it. "Listen, I have had another dream," he said. "The sun, moon, and 11 stars bowed low before me." This time he told the dream to his father as well as to his brothers, but his father scolded him. "What kind of dream is that?" he asked. "Will your mother and I and your brothers actually come and bow to the ground before you?" But while his brothers were jealous of Joseph, his father wondered what the dreams meant. Many of us have come from dysfunctional families of some sort or another, and sometimes it's come from what we have perceived to be favoritism. However, in spite of all of this family drama, God was clearly alerting Joseph to a future plan of his, but Joseph clearly wasn't ready. And so the path that God chose for his development plan was an interesting one. But there's something in here that all of us can learn, in that God often calls us to positions of leadership long before we're ready to lead, but many of us are too immature to realize it. Therefore, some of us have made significant leadership mistakes. But before Joseph had a chance to make any kind of leadership mistake, the dysfunction of his family led to this. Genesis 37, 12 through 14 and 18 through 28. Soon after this, Joseph's brothers went to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem. When they had been gone for some time, Jacob said to Joseph, "Your brothers are pasturing the sheep at Shechem. Get ready, and I will send you to them." "I'm ready to go," Joseph replied. "Go and see how your brothers and the flocks are getting along," Jacob said. "Then come back and bring me a report." So Jacob sent him on his way, and Joseph traveled to Shechem from their home in the valley of Hebron. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. As he approached, they made plans to kill him. "Here comes the dreamer," they said. "Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns. We can tell our father a wild animal has eaten him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams." But when Reuben heard of their scheme, he came to Joseph's rescue. "Let's not kill him," he said. "Why should we shed any blood? Let's just throw him into this empty cistern here in the wilderness. Then he'll die without our laying a hand on him." Reuben was secretly planning to rescue Joseph and return him to his father. So when Joseph arrived, his brothers ripped off the beautiful robe he was wearing. Then they grabbed him and threw him into the cistern. Now the cistern was empty. There was no water in it. Then, just as they were sitting down to eat, they looked up and saw a caravan of camels in the distance, coming toward them. It was a group of Ishmaelite traders taking a load of gum, balm, and aromatic resin from Gilead down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain by killing our brother? We'd have to cover up the crime. Instead of hurting him, let's sell him to those Ishmaelite traders. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." And his brothers agreed. So when the Ishmaelites, who were Midianite traders, came by, Joseph's brothers pulled him out of the cistern and sold him to them for 20 pieces of silver, and the traders took him to Egypt. Although we're not told how Joseph felt or how he reacted or how he responded to the treatment that he received from his brothers, I think it's safe to assume that there was a lot of shock. There was a lot of incredible sadness and surprise. But this was all, believe it or not, a part of God's plan and how he was going to develop Joseph. And to prove that point, look at where it is that Joseph ends up. Genesis 39, 1 through 6. When Joseph was taken to Egypt by the Ishmaelite traders, he was purchased by Potiphar, an Egyptian officer. Potiphar was captain of the guard for Pharaoh, the king of Egypt. The Lord was with Joseph, so he succeeded in everything he did as he served in the home of his Egyptian master. Potiphar noticed this and realized that the Lord was with Joseph, giving him success in everything he did. This pleased Potiphar, so he soon made Joseph his personal attendant. He put him in charge of his entire household and everything he owned. From the day Joseph was put in charge of his master's household and property, the Lord began to bless Potiphar's household for Joseph's sake. All his household affairs ran smoothly, and his crops and livestock flourished. So Potiphar gave Joseph complete administrative responsibility over everything he owned. With Joseph there, he didn't worry about a thing except what kind of food to eat. And so, here we have Joseph, after having maybe one of the biggest what moments he would ever have, in that his brothers think about killing him and then decide to sell him into slavery. He now finds himself pleasantly in a relationship with Potiphar, of all people, a great leader who he has built trust with, and now is in a position where he gets to oversee everything in Potiphar's household. And at this point in time, it is possible that Joseph is thinking, all right, man, this is good. I can see where God is growing me. But then the what moments keep happening. You see, we're told that Potiphar's wife took a liking to Joseph and then actually tried to seduce him. But when he refused her, she made the claim that he attempted to rape her, which got him thrown into prison again. So here we are, another what moment. But once again, here's what we're told happened. Genesis 39, 19 through 23. Potiphar was furious when he heard his wife's story about how Joseph had treated her. So he took Joseph and threw him into the prison where the king's prisoners were held, and there he remained. But the Lord was with Joseph in the prison and showed him his faithful love. And the Lord made Joseph a favorite with the prison warden. Before long, the warden put Joseph in charge of all the other prisoners and over everything that happened in the prison. The warden had no more worries because Joseph took care of everything. The Lord was with him and caused everything he did to succeed. Even though Joseph went from posh to prison in one day, we can see from both of these passages where it's talking about these major what transitions for Joseph, that God continually blessed him in the midst of that to help him to understand, I'm with you. I'm still working in this whole entire plan. And so when Joseph found himself once again in a different type of position where he was called to be a servant, he kept remembering, or he kept his focus on the fact that God was with him and that God was still developing, which is something that all of us can learn from, in that God often develops us for leadership by developing us as servants first. But unfortunately, the what moments kept coming for Joseph. You see, we're told that the Pharaoh had a couple of individuals thrown into prison that had really angered him. One happened to be his cupbearer, and the other happened to be a baker. And so while both of them were in prison, they ended up meeting Joseph, and both of them ended up having dreams that were very disturbing to them. But because of God's relationship with Joseph, he helped Joseph to interpret those dreams. And as a result, here's what we're told happened. Genesis 49 through 23. So the chief cupbearer told Joseph his dream first. In my dream, he said, I saw a grapevine in front of me. The vine had 3 branches that began to bud and blossom, and soon it produced clusters of ripe grapes. I was holding Pharaoh's wine cup in my hand, so I took a cluster of grapes and squeezed the juice into the cup. Then I placed the cup in Pharaoh's hand. This is what the dream means, Joseph said. The 3 branches represent 3 days. Within 3 days, Pharaoh will lift you up and restore you to your position as his chief cupbearer. And please remember me and do me a favor when things go well for you. Mention me to Pharaoh so he might let me out of this place. For I was kidnapped from my homeland, the land of the Hebrews, and now I'm here in prison. But I did nothing to deserve it. When the chief baker saw that Joseph had given the first dream such a positive interpretation, he said to Joseph, I had a dream too. In my dream, there were 3 baskets of white pastry stacked on my head. The top basket contained all kinds of pastries for Pharaoh, but the birds came and ate them from the basket on my head. This is what the dream means, Joseph told him. The 3 baskets also represent 3 days. 3 days from now, Pharaoh will lift you up and impale your body on a pole. Then birds will come and peck away at your flesh. Pharaoh's birthday came 3 days later, and he prepared a banquet for all his officials and staff. He summoned his chief cupbearer and the chief baker to join the other officials. He then restored the chief cupbearer to his former position so he could again hand Pharaoh his cup. But Pharaoh impaled the chief baker just as Joseph had predicted when he interpreted his dream. Pharaoh's chief cupbearer, however, forgot all about Joseph, never giving him another thought. Actually, the cupbearer did give Joseph another thought, but it wasn't until 2 years later when Pharaoh himself had some dreams, and that's when he remembered, oh yeah, there's this guy in prison who knows God and can interpret dreams. You should talk to him. And so Joseph was summoned from prison, and after getting a good clean shave and freshening up, Pharaoh tells him his dreams, which indicated that there was going to be a time of plenty and then a time of famine, but he didn't understand that. So he tells these dreams to Joseph, and after Joseph interprets these dreams for him and gives him an idea about what to do, here's what we're told. Genesis 41, 37 through 44. Joseph's suggestions were well received by Pharaoh and his officials. So Pharaoh asked his officials, can we find anyone else like this man so obviously filled with the Spirit of God? Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, since God has revealed the meaning of the dreams to you, clearly no one else is as intelligent or wise as you are. You will be in charge of my court, and all my people will take orders from you. Only I, sitting on my throne, will have a rank higher than yours. Pharaoh said to Joseph, I hereby put you in charge of the entire land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh removed his signet ring from his hand and placed it on Joseph's finger. He dressed him in fine linen clothing and hung a gold chain around his neck. Then he had Joseph ride in the chariot reserved for his second in command. And wherever Joseph went, the command was shouted, kneel down! So Pharaoh put Joseph in charge of all Egypt. And Pharaoh said to him, I am Pharaoh, but no one will lift a hand or foot in the entire land of Egypt without your approval. Now, just so you know, we're told that Joseph was 17 when these dreams began. And now we're told that he's 30 years old when this happens, when Pharaoh finally places him into a position of authority. Which means it was 13 years after Joseph was warned in a dream that he would be a leader for God and that his own family would bow before him before God's plan actually started to look like a reality. That's a long time to stay faithful to a calling, especially when there are so many different what moments that easily could have derailed Joseph from this promise that God had given to him. But it didn't. None of those moments actually derailed him. Instead, what happened was Joseph continued to believe in the promises of God and trusted in him in spite of the what moments. And as a result, God was setting him up to fulfill that promise. and to make a massive difference that would ultimately change the course for all of history, which is what I'm going to be talking about on Sunday, and I hope you can join me.